Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. Just search Inside the Birds on YouTube to get all their YouTube content as well. This hour of the Sports Bash is brought to you by Jersey Cow, a great place for the family to hang out and eat ice cream. Ice cream is a year-round thing at Jersey Cow, open every day from noon to 10 at the Northfield and Brigantine locations. All right, let's bring Geoff Mosher in from the Inside the Birds podcast. For those of you watching the live video stream, there is Geoff Mosher. Holy mackerel, Mosher is in the house. There he is. What's going on, Mosher? The Phillies are on the brink of elimination. The Eagles kind of hanging under the radar right now, but they got a lot of news over at the NovaCare Complex.
Oh, yeah, you got players getting released. You got players coming off getting into the 21-day window. You got players coming back from injury. It's quite the bye week return for the Eagles. And, hopefully the Eagles, I think you and I were making this joke the other day. They couldn't hurt you last weekend, right? They could not hurt you along with the Phillies. Now, this week, man, they can really help you, but they sure could hurt you if they don't win this game. That would really hurt.
All right, well, let's look at some of the things that happened. Lane Johnson and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith back. It looked like Smith has not been cleared yet, but feeling better that those three guys should be out there this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to see Devontae Smith cleared for just so that he's doing okay and doing well and can contribute to the offense. We'll see as the week progresses. It's been almost 3 weeks, not exactly, but almost. So that's normally for concussions a time where, you don't see guys start to miss more. So we'll see how he is. But, as long as he's back, when he does get back, I think the Eagles can be happy to be at full strength against a Browns defense that it's not. I know it probably, you look at it statistically and you're like, they haven't played very well, but I think that's sort of the symbiotic relationship of how bad their offense has been, because there is some talent on this Browns defense, although it's a little banged up.
Yeah, one thing is obviously you get those two weapons back, Lane Johnson, the offensive line. The offense should be in a much better situation, you feel like, here. Let's go over to the defensive side. We talked about the 21-day window. What's your thoughts on Sidney Brown? Does he help this defense at all, or is this just more and more depth?
I think he can. I just don't know how yet. A good athlete, dynamic player, does some things well. Not somebody you want maybe in coverage, but somebody who'd like to come into the box and, hit somebody, make a tackle. And as we've seen, tackling at the safety level has not been great for the Eagles. He can help you on special teams while they work him. I'm curious to see if he gets activated this week. They do have an open roster spot. So curious to see if he gets the activation. If he does, I imagine his help would come more on special teams for the first week. I don't know, but we'll see. But yeah, he can definitely help because he's another body. He's young, he's dynamic, and he is known for being able to tackle.
Yeah, speaking of tackling, one guy that didn't get a chance to tackle was Devin White. Let's get your take on that whole situation. They signed him. They brought him in for a decent amount of money. I guess kind of a hey, we'll throw a shot. This is what they've done. This is who they've been, right? They've been a team that has taken a high drafted guy that flamed out somewhere else, and they took a shot on him. That was their blueprint for the Super Bowl team. Patrick Robinson, Chris Long, and it worked out for them. It has not really worked out for them since, and this is just another in the long line of, hey, let's get a first-round pick that didn't play well for you, but let's take him here.
Yeah. Now, money doesn't matter to me. It sort of matters to me, even though it's a big – I mean, listen, you sign this guy for almost $5 million, you're going to make almost that, and that's money just flushed down the toilet. Somebody say you could use it. You could have used it to do this, that, and the other. If the Eagles wanted money, they can create money. That's really not the issue to me. The issue to me is that it represents maybe a lack of either good scouting and good process. And you always want everything to be done with a good process. Not everybody has to, but you want it to make sense. And for 2 straight years, the Eagles have signed some guys from other teams that didn't necessarily play in their scheme or fit their scheme. And the Eagles were hoping that it would work. And it didn't work. Terrell Edmonds at safety last year did not work. and he had not played in a Fangio-style scheme in Pittsburgh, and he did not live up to what he was supposed to be in Pittsburgh when they drafted in the first round. And the same thing with Devin White. Devin White was benched last year. Devin White was a player who was known as being a little reckless, a little bit of a freelancer, and Vic Fangio is a guy who doesn't really tolerate that from his linebacker level, and that's clearly one of the reasons he didn't make the starting lineup for this team. And so it puts the Eagles in a strange bind. And, like I said, you want to know that there's a good cohesion there between your coaching, their philosophy, your scouting, their philosophy, and that the general manager is supervising this and believes that there's a symmetry there. Why you're signing guys all of a sudden who don't fit what you do, or you're trying to rekindle a flame that wasn't there for a while, is alarming to me, because now it's not just one guy, it's two guys. We can point to a couple of free agent signings on both sides of the ball. The trade for Jahan Dotson, which doesn't look good now, to say, hey, wait a minute. Some signings you could say, all right, that just didn't work out. But when you start to see a pattern of signings that aren't working out, when you know that was the reason why you went to and won a Super Bowl a couple of years ago, it raises some flags.
You take a look at all the different things here. Devin White, you brought him in. And it just hasn't worked out to the point where you release him and just let him kind of go on his way. So now what's this linebacking core? Does this say, hey, no, we're happy with Dean and Bond? Or is this more, hey, we weren't going to use White even if one of those guys got hurt. Someone else has. Because the thought, I guess, was he doesn't play special teams, so he's not active on game day. But if Dean got hurt, White would be the next guy. I guess this message is Trotter and or Van Sumeren or Oren Burks have also passed over him.
Yeah, and that happened not just recently, Mike. White was never going to be the next guy. Yeah. That was made pretty abundantly clear when they named Nakobe Dean the starter, and then they kept 5 inside linebackers when you really only play 2 at a time. And then when they signed Oren Burks off the practice squad as a 6th inside linebacker and a 2nd veteran inside linebacker from without, he came over from the 49ers like White came over from the Bucs. That, to me, was the surest sign that you would never see. We said this on the podcast, that you would never see Devin White take the field for the Eagles. So I think Nick Sirianni said today that the next man up would be Jeremiah Trotter Jr., which is interesting. You would think that Burks, with his experience and playing for the 49ers and his size, 6'3", big guy, physical guy. He showed you when he played that preseason finale. He didn't need to play that preseason finale. He looked like a guy who should not have been playing in that game. He was good enough. So I would have thought he might be next guy up, but I get it. Jeremiah Trotter did have a very good preseason, and he does have good linebacker instincts. The bottom line of it all, Mike, and people get mad at us for saying this, but listen, we just report what we're told, right? It's been described to me by more than one person around the league who looks at the Eagles linebackers as they are a collection of backup linebackers. They're all basically backup linebackers. When you start to go look around the league and compare other teams that have stronger linebacking units, obviously they're starters for the Eagles, but in the eyes of GMs and personnel people around the league, they may not be starters for a whole bunch of teams.
Yeah, obviously that's a position. And look, I don't know, would you surmise, yes, they're not the greatest group, but if they hurt this defense, and would you look at them and say, like Nate Geary a couple of years ago, teams just said, where's 47? Let's go after that guy. He was a detriment to the lineup. Is this group right now, are they so bad that they're a problem on this defense?
No, Nate Geary was a detriment. He shouldn't have been a backup. He shouldn't have been a starter. He shouldn't have been a sub linebacker. He was not good enough to play football in the league. I don't think he's really played since leaving the Eagles. He may have bounced around to a team here and there, but these guys, I think, will be listen, I think what you've seen in the first 4 weeks is what you'll see. You're going to see some games who, depending on the matchup, right, they're going to look pretty good, like Bond did in week 1 against the Packers. And then there's going to be some schemes and offensive line and some personnel that they struggle against, like you saw against the Falcons, right, in week 2. Played better against the Saints, clearly, in week 3, but then not so great week 4 against the Bucs. So, I guess that's my way of saying when you face a lot of teams that can pass and throw the ball over the middle, probably not going to look so good. When you face teams that can run around the edges, They may struggle there. When you face teams that are going to try to pound you up the middle, might be all right there.
Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. Yeah, no doubt about it. It's an up and down, and it's like this defense. I want to get your opinion more on this. Is this defense? To win games in this league, that for them, they're going to have to score 29, 30 points a game for the most part. Now, there are going to be weeks where their defense has a really good game plan. They execute it well, and like the Saints game, where they play really well. But the problem, Jeff, with this defense, as I see it, and see if you agree, is without the pass rush, they're just going to lack the consistency to be able to keep teams in that 17 to 14 point range over the long haul. For this team to win, it's going to have to be 28-24, 35-28. That's who they feel like.
Yeah. Yes. Now, maybe they can do some things differently, and we'll see coming out of the break, Mike.
Do you think this defense, in your mind, with the personnel they have, looks or is a different defense in Week 14 than it is in Week 4? Or do you think they just don't have the consistency to really – the ceiling of growth, is it there or just not really?
No, I think there's enough young players for growth to be there. I mean, Zach Bond, I think, can continue to grow in the role. We talked about Week 2, right, when they played the Falcons, and you saw the right guard for the Falcons, the Pro Bowl right guard whose name is escaping me now, Lidstrom, constantly cutting him on the backside of a wide zone run and getting him on his knees and decleating him, right? And he'll know next time around, not necessarily facing the Falcons, but teams that run that to those wide zones to look for that, right? So there's growth with ability with him, with Nakobe Dean, maybe if Trotter gets on the field. I think there's growth ability, obviously, with Jalen Carter, with Quinyon Mitchell, with Reed Blankenship, with Cooper DeJean. There's more young guys with growth capacity. I do think they'll look differently in Week 14, but they clearly have to – I don't think the issue is just that they have to grow. They have to schematically do different things as well, and that might start with playing a little bit more up coverage or press coverage to give that pass rush an extra half a second or so to get to the quarterback. And then, of course, also stopping the run to put the offense in less favorable down and distance scenarios.
Last year there were a couple trades. Chase Young to San Francisco, and that's one of those deals. Wow, San Francisco added Chase Young? I mean, whoa, he's gone already. They already said that was a miss. Montez Sweat went to Chicago. That's kind of worked out. The Eagles tried a couple of years ago where they made a trade. It seems to get pass rush, this team is going to have to hope that there's somebody out there that's Washington and says, we're waving the white flag on this season. That, to me, is about the only way they find or manufacture pass rush outside, Jeff, that this Huff thing totally does a 180. And the other part of the 180 to turn into a full 360 is that Nolan Smith figures it out.
I think that's a big part of it. And listen, I think with Nolan Smith, if you just put him outside the right tackle and say rush the quarterback and you'll figure it out by Week 14, you're going to be sadly mistaken. There's a clear strength disadvantage. We've seen Bijan Robinson plant him on his ass. We saw in the last game, Cade Otton plant him on his ass, right? So I can say that, right? That's okay.
You're
word,
good.
Right?
You're good.
Okay. All right. I'm really trying to, get some good effect here, like a good radio guy would do. So lining him up and saying you'll get better by getting knocked on your ass every game is not going to work. So, but we know he's athletic. We know he's fast. We know he can move. So now it's okay. Can we move him around? Can we line him up over the A gaps, right? Like maybe what Dan Quinn did with Micah Parsons when he was in Dallas. Can we stunt him? Can we twist him? Can we get 6 guys up at scrimmage, drop 2, rush 2? He's one of the rushers that's unaccounted for, right? And gets a free ride or helps somebody else get a free ride. That's why I say, like, this defense has a lot of room to grow because it's young, but it's also going to need schematic tweaks to get better.
All right, there was a report, Jeremy Fowler, suggesting that they're going to make the change to Cooper DeJean. He didn't say it was definitely happening, but one of the parts of the report, forget the Cooper thing, and you can comment on that because Nick kind of didn't want to clarify it, but it looked like Cooper was in that spot today. But one of the parts of the report that I thought was interesting was that he said there were other defensive, situations that were discussed. And I'm wondering, in your mind, is there any other spot on this defensive line in configuration that they could even consider making changes? I could get the wording for you if you didn't see it.
No, I think I heard him say it. I've been trying to think about what too, like, moving Maddox to safety. I don't know how when you're struggling to tackle and make plays.
You move him to safety to replace. I mean, Blankenship's one guy who has a couple picks. I mean, are you going to really already give up on Chauncey Gardner-Johnson?
In fact, I would worry about Maddox being on the chopping block to make room for Sidney Brown once they activate Sidney. Sidney could be one of those people who you start to see in a big nickel package more. I'm not obviously if Trotter's the next man up over Burks, maybe there are some dime sets where they want to get him on the field for that more. I don't know, Mike.
Yeah, by the way, he said he went on to say that multiple changes were discussed on the defensive side of the ball, but nothing has been reported at this time. The one guy was Cooper DeJean taking over at nickel for veteran Devontae Maddox.
Yeah. I mean, listen, C.J. Gardner-Johnson's been really disappointing, but for the money you paid him, you're not yanking him out of the starting lineup. I wonder if the changes can be interpreted as scheme changes, not necessarily personnel changes.
Right, like we paid Bryce Huff $51 million, and you're playing incorrectly, something to that effect.
Perhaps, I mean, they did try to get him in some wide nine looks recently, so that's where he kind of predominantly played with the Jets. Maybe Jalex Hunt was in the conversation. We'll see. Moro Ojomo getting some time in the four-man rush next to Jalen Carter.
Well, you know this, Moshe. Like, fans get excited about the young players, right? Nolan Smith was the guy we were excited about, right? People were excited about Nolan Smith. He didn't get a lot of time last year. So in training camp, he became the guy. Oh, they got a first-round pick. They're going to let him play. He was a first-round guy. He's got to be good. Jalex Hunt is a complete project, no?
Theoretically he was, Mike, and I try not to make anything of training camp to a fault probably and preseason, but there were, Andrew DeCecco wrote about this a lot, and Andrew observed that he didn't look like he was confused by doing some of the back end things that Vic Fangio does. Remember, he started his career off at Cornell, so he's pretty bright, and he started off as a safety, so he probably has a better understanding of spatial awareness, coverage, concepts like that. And he could probably tackle a little bit too, right? So he didn't look in the preseason games when I watched like a guy who didn't have a clue. When you talk about edge rushers, you talk about, do they have a plan? Do they have a plan? And this is why Devin White, when people said, well, why couldn't they have just tried him as an edge rusher because he had 9 sacks with the Bucs? People don't understand that when you're an inside linebacker in a Todd Bowles defense, you're generally rushing the A gaps. You're a free ride a lot of times because Todd breaks down protection schemes, and all you have to do is beat maybe a running back or a tight end kept in the block. Being an edge rusher, you have to understand hand usage. You have to understand foot chop. You have to understand speed to power. You have to know how to bull rush. Right, that is the work of a edge rusher, not an inside linebacker who gets 8 or 9 sacks because of protection breakdown. So that's why Devin White was never used as an edge rusher, and it never made sense to try to use him full-time that way or part-time that way. But Jalex Hunt looked like someone who at least had a plan for what he wanted to do. So maybe there's opportunities here to get him on the field and see if that translates.
All right, I'm not anti. I mean, if you want to give me a shot and say, hey, go out there and see what you got, kid, I have no problem in a position right now. This is a different situation. I don't have anybody that has a track record, really. Nobody's out there like, hey, you've shown me you can do it, so I'm going to stick with you. This is like the Phillies offense. I got a bunch of guys out there. We get this all the time. Hey, why don't you give Clemens a shot, or why don't you give this guy a shot? Well, the track record suggests this guy is slumping more than he stinks.
Right.
The Eagles guys aren't really slumping more than they stink. Right now, they stink first. They stink first before they've slumped. So.
Right. And you have to earn a slump, right? You have to have the opposite of a slump. You have to have a streak to be in a slump.
Yeah. Like if at one point for 6 months of the year I hit 280, and then the last month of the year I hit 160, well, somewhere it's going to start balancing back out for me. So I'm not going to be like crazy. But so far, Nolan Smith, I said he's not even getting to the point where he can offer the quarterback a tissue. He can't even get that close to him. So I have no problem if they say, hey, let's get this young kid and see if he has any spark to the defense that, quite frankly, needs something. We'll see it all unfold. I know this is your last time on this week for Football at 4. Give me a thought on, styles make fights. Cleveland's really struggled, but, they do blitz, oddly enough. Jim Schwartz's D. Blitz is the third most out of all defenses in the NFL. That was a surprising number that I saw.
Don't you kind of dig that? I always dig when veteran guys in the league, whether it's offense or like Andy Reid, great example, goes to Kansas City, didn't even take much of time off, a year, but he reinvented himself there very, very quickly. I mean, he wound up trading for Alex Smith. If most people remember, he hired a coach, Chris Alt, who coached, I believe, at Nevada when Kaepernick was there, and he started implementing the pistol. And all of a sudden, Andy has sort of reinvented his offensive schemes and using more motion and he's not that old stale West Coast offense guy. And here's Jim Schwartz, who's been doing it one way for quite a long time. And that got, as you know, Mike, the fans would complain. Jim Schwartz doesn't blitz, runs the same wide 9, cover 1, cover 3. You just know it's coming. And once you get a few guys hurt and you're not as powerful, then you can pick apart the defense. And there were times the fans were right about that. I kind of get a kick out of Jim Schwartz reinventing himself. I feel bad that the offense has been so bad for him that he can't really relish the fact that he's done some different things. But it is a surprising thing to see Jim Schwartz, number 3 in the league in blitzing right now.
I want to ask you this. Robert Saleh yesterday out of the clear blue sky whacked. If they lost this game to the Browns, any thought that Nick could be in some trouble in season?
Man, that's a hard question. I could have seen it with Saleh only because Woody Johnson's sort of an impetuous owner, right? And, you never rule anything out. Plus, Woody never hired Robert Saleh. His son did when Woody was out ambassadoring in England in the Trump administration. So that one didn't shock me. Jeffrey has not fired a coach this early. I mean, the earliest was Chip Kelly with a couple of games left, right?
Yep, I think one game left.
Yeah, at 2-3, I don't think he fought. I mean, if they lose 45-0, maybe we all have to have a conversation, right? Like if they really go out there and crap the bed in a way that you just could not fathom against this horrible Browns team, perhaps because you could just never rule out the whole first time for anything thing. But I really think that, no, I don't think just a regular loss would do that.
Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, you can check that out on all podcasting platforms. Football at 4 rolls on tomorrow with Andrew DeCecco. Adam Kaplan's here on Friday. Mosher's back on Monday when hopefully the Eagles give us something fun because the Phillies might not.
Don't say that, please.
Enjoy the game.
Thanks.
All right, Geoff Mosher, everybody, from the Inside the Birds podcast, of course, right here for Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.